Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. Delighted to welcome back Congressman Ritchie Torres from the great state of New York. Welcome, Congressman.
Always a pleasure.
So we had tariffs. Now maybe we have a pause on tariffs, except they're going to be 125% tariffs on China, except there's going to be 10% tariffs on other countries. What is going on?
The only certainty is uncertainty.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a madman in the White House. I mean, Donald Trump is on a kamikaze mission to crash the global economy.
Yep.
He has engineered one of the largest destructions of wealth in American history. And since Inauguration Day, the United States has lost $11 trillion in wealth. And 48 hours following his so-called Liberation Day, we lost $6.6 trillion in wealth. And the Trump tariffs had the same impact on the S&P 500 as 9/11, but the obvious difference is that the tariffs are completely self-inflicted.
Yes.
So never in our history has one man, one president, done so much harm to so many, so quickly, so senselessly. I'm in a state of shock. I hope this is a nightmare from which we can all finally awake.
No kidding. When you talk to business leaders in New York, the tariffs are on, the tariffs are off. How do they plan? How do they decide whether they're going to hire someone, whether they're going to import a new product? What are they discussing with one another and with you these days?
I mean, what businesses need, what we all need to function is stability and certainty and predictability. And chaos is not a bug, but a feature of Donald Trump's presidency. Like the cornerstone of capitalism is confidence. And consumers who no longer have confidence are going to stop consuming. Businesses that no longer have confidence are going to stop hiring and expanding. Investors who no longer have confidence are going to stop investing, risking their capital. And consumption is 70% of our economy.
Right.
So if there's a decline in confidence, there's inevitably going to be a recession. And the Trump tariffs were going to cause us to experience the worst of both worlds, both a recession and inflation, which is a nightmare.
Right. What do your Republicans colleagues say? Yesterday, they were all defending tariffs. Are they going to come out today and say, oh, it's a great thing we don't have tariffs? What do they do? Are they just hiding under their desks, pretending that no one should hold them responsible for this chaos?
The the Republican Congress is worse than a rubber stamp because at least a rubber stamp leaves an impression. The hypocrisy is staggering. Like if President Biden, if any Democratic president had imposed the largest tariffs in more than a century, raising taxes to levels not seen in a half a century, causing the evaporation of $11 trillion in wealth, the Republicans would be in open revolt. Every Republican would be screaming socialism, would be accusing the president of betraying the country. And instead, the Republicans have been deafeningly silent, which is a reminder that the Republican Party is no longer a normal political party. It has become a religion whose God, whose false idol is Donald Trump.
I think that's exactly right. Meanwhile, they're supposed to be working on a budget, and I don't see any sign of a budget. Are we going to get anything out of House Republicans this week?
It's the latest example of hypocrisy from the Republicans. So, when we passed the American Rescue Plan in response to a deep recession caused by COVID, it grew the deficit by 1.8 trillion over the course of 10 years. And Republicans were screaming that it was fiscally irresponsible, it was wasteful. The Senate Republican proposal will grow the deficit by $5.8 trillion. It is 3 times more expensive than the American Rescue Plan.
Right.
So like the notion that Republicans care anything about fiscal responsibility is a lie.
And it's very interesting. There's a very fiscally conservative group, the Committee for a Responsible Budget, and they have come out and excoriated this. At least for the American Rescue Plan, we got something. Policemen were kept on board, families got relief. Here, it's simply a continuation or an increase for tax breaks for the very, very wealthy. Do you see people in your district getting any benefit from a budget like this?
Both the Senate budget and the House budget are a nightmare for my district, and I represent the poorest congressional district in America.
Right.
I have the highest number of constituents enrolled in Medicaid, about 67% of my district. So more than 70% of the children in my district are covered by Medicaid. More than 80% of the nursing home residents, more than 90% of baby deliveries are covered by Medicaid. And the House Republican budget authorized up to $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid, which is not only health insurance for the lowest income, but it's become long-term care for the elderly and the disabled and the chronically ill at a time when our society is aging rapidly, at a time when we should be investing more, not less, in long-term care. Republicans are literally going to cut SNAP and healthcare in the tune of $1 trillion in order to fund tax cuts for the top 1%. It's an egregious misplacement of priorities.
And meanwhile, although we got some temporary relief today, the government seems bent on continuing to round up people they suspect of being part of a Venezuelan gang under the pretext of the uh, Alien Enemies Act, an 18th century law. There was a district court judge in New York just today and one in Texas today who said, time out, you can't do this. What's been the reaction on the ground, and what do you make of this utter lawlessness where they seem to not only be picking up people on scant evidence, but when they have made a mistake and they acknowledge it, they seem uninterested and even resistant to getting the person back?
Of all the depredations of Donald Trump, and there are many, too many to count, I mean, there's no greater threat to liberty than the loss of due process. I mean, if there are more provisions in the Bill of Rights about protecting the rights of the accused, the right of due process, than even provisions about free speech or freedom of religion or freedom of the petition. And so if we lose due process, we lose our democracy. And under Donald Trump, we live in a world where the federal government can misclassify you as a non-citizen gang member, abduct you in the dead of night, and then transport you to a torture chamber in El Salvador. And I cannot imagine a greater assault on democracy than what we've seen from the Trump administration. And it's not only going to affect non-citizens, it will affect all of us, because due process is what determines whether you actually have done what you are accused of doing.
And I think that is absolutely crucial. People have to understand they have already made mistakes, and they can make mistakes saying that someone who is a citizen, even a citizen by birth in the United States, they accuse of being a foreign gang member, and off they go. Are you somewhat relieved that at least lower courts are beginning to put a halt to this? And what, if anything, can and should Congress be doing about this?
Well, look, a functioning Congress would hold the president accountable. And we should, I think one of the lessons learned from the Trump presidency is we have to be careful about the laws that we draft. There are and some of these laws date back to the 18th century, but
Right.
whether it's the International Emergency Economic Powers Act or the Alien Enemies Act, we have to stop passing laws that are so open-ended that presidents can easily assert sweeping claims of authority. Like, Donald Trump has been aided and abetted by these open-ended acts of Congress. And we need to, I think, go in the direction of limiting presidential power, not expanding it.
Sounds like a very conservative principle that used to be about limiting executive power and due process, things like
The
that.
irony is the liberals are the new conservatives, when compared to Donald Trump.
Exactly. Last question as we reach the end of our time. Last week, we saw mammoth outpouring of people in the streets, over 1,500 different locations around the United States, peaceful demonstrations. Are you more optimistic that the American people are beginning to awake and beginning to realize that the democracy really depends upon them, on active citizens?
I mean, I have been profoundly impressed by the mobilization, by the mass mobilization of Americans. And it sends a powerful message that Donald Trump is not a king and we're not his subjects. We're a democracy. We are citizens. And we're prepared to fight for our democracy. And we're well positioned. Democrats are well positioned to win back the House in 2026. Donald Trump is uniquely unpopular. He's the only president since 1937 who has a negative approval rating at the very beginning of his administration. So Donald Trump's greatest enemy is himself.
Exactly. And unfortunately, Republicans seem to be hiding asleep at the wheel, and they are not doing their duty under Article 1. After all, Congress is Article 1. Thank you so much for being with us, Congressman, to try to figure out what's going on. I don't envy you going back to deal with your colleagues, but best of luck. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Take care.